Hello, everybody, and welcome to this conversation. I have a wonderful guest today. I have Kelsey Morgan, who is the founder and the Chief Program Officer for EverFree. So, Kelsey is also a PhD candidate, and she is working on her PhD, and she's going to tell us more about this. So, Kelsey, welcome from Orange,
Thank you.
California. Tell us more about the project. I believe you have a presentation to share with us.
I do. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. We are so thrilled to be a part of the Together Women Rise community. So, so love what you guys are doing and can't wait to get to share more about our work.
Wonderful.
So, we're going to talk just briefly about human trafficking, what it is, and why it is that we do this work. So, human trafficking, really simply put, is human beings forcing, coercing, or manipulating other human beings into sexual exploitation or labor. And it's an economically motivated crime. They're doing this, making a profit off of the enslavement of other human beings. There are more than 40 million people around the world living in situations of slavery and human trafficking right now as we speak. 70% of those victims are women and girls, and 1 in 4 victims is a child. The statistic that really drives our team is that less than 1% of survivors ever are identified and receive the support that they need to thrive in freedom. In fact, the most recent US Trafficking in Persons report came out. It's a global report on trafficking around the world, and less than 0.5% of victims were identified last year, only 90,000. And that is what EverFree is on a mission to change. We are creating a world where women and girls are free, and not just free, but able to flourish in their freedom. We are helping free communities from human trafficking and ensuring that survivors have the care, the support, and the opportunities to go on to thrive. I usually like to talk about our work through a story because behind all of these statistics are real human beings, mothers and daughters, fathers and sons. And it's because of them that we do this work. So I want to tell you about a recent human trafficking case that we worked on in Uganda. This is Mary's story. It's not her real name. We always protect the identities of those that we work with. Mary was just 13 years old when she was trafficked. She came from a loving home with a mother and father and other siblings. She was the oldest child, and her family, though loving, was struggling financially. And as the oldest child, she really felt the burden of their struggles. And a neighbor, a woman, knew that she felt this burden and began to take advantage of it. She told Mary that there was a job in the city, and though Mary said no the first few times, this woman eventually convinced her to leave her home without telling her parents. She said, if you go, imagine how happy your parents will be when you're sending money home and they're able to provide for your siblings. So Mary left her home before the sun came up one morning. But instead of this golden opportunity waiting for her, there were actually two men who physically assaulted her. They used chloroform to sedate her, and she woke up in a room in a city that she'd never been in. She was surrounded by 9 men, and that's when her sexual exploitation began. This went on day in and day out. She wasn't able to leave this room. She actually wasn't able to leave to even use the bathroom. So, as you can imagine, her health began to deteriorate really quickly. She became so sick because of the physical exploitation that was happening to her body, in addition to the emotional and the trauma that she was going through. She heard her traffickers outside of the door one day arguing whether they should kill her or leave her on the roadside to die. They came in again with chloroform, and she woke up on the side of the road. She had been disposed of like a piece of garbage. This precious little girl disposed of and left to die. Thankfully, a good Samaritan found her and connected her back with her family, who took her to the police. And because of EverFree's relationship with the police, she was referred to our program for comprehensive aftercare services. When she came in, the first thing that we did was take her to the hospital so that her body could receive the treatment to heal from the abuse that she had gone through. We then connected her to a social worker who began working with Mary to develop a plan that was unique to her individual needs, her dreams for the future, the trauma that she had been through, and her desires for justice. Mary wanted to pursue justice against her trafficker. So as she stayed in our shelter, she received therapy. She was in a loving home where she had people caring for her 24/7, nursing her back to health. And she met with our legal aid team. She and her family opened up a case against their trafficker. And I'm so excited to share that through our support, Mary's trafficker was convicted of aggravated child trafficking with a sentence of 20 years imprisonment. And her case was the very first case of restitution under the Trafficking Act in Uganda. So her trafficker has to pay 25 million shillings in exchange for what she did to Mary. And we'll get into this later, but this really speaks to the systems change work that EverFree does. We are ensuring that traffickers are being held accountable for what they are doing, and that sends a message to the community and to other traffickers. Of Mary's success, she said this beautiful quote I want to share with you. She said, "Justice is what love looks like in public." And so Mary is now in school. She has an educational scholarship from EverFree. We've actually met with the school so that they're ensuring that she has some trauma-informed care, that her teacher understands what she's recovering from. And she and her family are moving on in life with this beautiful justice that happened for them. And all of this just speaks to the work that we do at EverFree. A huge component of our work are these aftercare homes or safe homes. These are safe facilities where survivors come in and receive 24/7 support as they heal from what they've been through and rebuild their life. We offer safe shelter, case management, comprehensive health care, counseling in all different forms. We have group therapy, individual therapy. We actually have PhD and master's level trauma therapists who work with us. So they do things like EMDR, and we have a yoga program. We have all sorts of therapeutic modalities that are really effective in helping survivors heal from the trauma they've been through. We have legal aid. Last year, 30 traffickers were convicted through our partnership with the public prosecutors in Uganda. We support with family reunification, so identifying a safe family and community for survivors to return to. And key to healing is educational and economic empowerment. You have to address those key vulnerabilities that led to trafficking if you're ever going to stop those cycles of abuse and exploitation. And we offer spiritual support in whatever type of faith practice that the survivors are comfortable with. We have staff from all different faith backgrounds, and we want to ensure that the survivors, if they want, have different areas of support that meet their needs. In addition to these residential programs, we actually have community-based programs as well. So not everyone needs long-term care in a residential facility. Some don't even need care at all. Some survivors want to go back home to their children or to their families. And so we offer these empowerment centers that are like outpatient programs that also provide services for those living in our shelters. We provide vocational training certification, job placement. We partner with Street Business School to provide entrepreneurship certification so that survivors can start their own businesses. And we actually just piloted a program in our Philippines branch where we provided this entrepreneurship program to parents of child survivors, because we know that we can't send those children back into those same economically desperate situations. And we actually saw all 20 parents from this pilot program graduate, and we're measuring the impact. So if this program works well, we'll be scaling this program across our different locations. These centers also provide educational scholarships. We've sent survivors through university. Some of them go on to be social workers or counselors of their own. And through these outpatient programs, the survivors also receive case management and counseling. All of our work is addressing what we have through research identified to be lasting freedom. And these are the domains that we're looking at: education and employment, physical health, a safe housing and environment, support network of strong connections and community, that sense of belonging and community, freedom from harm and knowledge of rights, and mental and emotional health. What we have found, and what we'll soon be validating through research, is that if these 6 areas are strong, survivors will be able to reach lasting freedom and to prevent cycles of re-exploitation and re-abuse that are common in this in human trafficking. We'll touch more on this too later, but accelerating freedom is where we talk about the systems change work that EverFree does. First of all, we train local leaders. These are frontline responders to identify and prevent trafficking. That's police officers, immigration officers, local community leaders. We even have college campus clubs that have been started so that these university students are preventing trafficking amongst their peers. We partner with the justice sector. We've trained prosecutors and judges so that survivors can receive justice and so that they're treated with dignity and in a trauma-informed way as they go through the court processes, which is so key for the survivors to be willing to participate and to not be re-traumatized as they go through that process. We empower survivor leaders. We actually have survivor-led boards on each of our organizations that advise our programming, and we empower them because we know that they have the key information to stop trafficking. One of our survivors actually just spoke at a huge government conference and got up. She said she had a message burning in her. And so she got up and took the stage and advocated for survivors. It was really powerful. And then we are actually contextualizing and replicating our model in global hotspots. So this is how EverFree will be scaling our work. We just launched a new replication in a remote region called Karamoja, which is on the border of Uganda and Kenya. It's the first aftercare program now in that community because of our replication strategy. And our big vision, what we're working towards, is to see millions of survivors flourishing and entire communities free from human trafficking.
Thank you, Kelsey, for the very, very comprehensive presentation. So let's unpack the complexity of human trafficking, right? I mean, you're working in certain countries. This happens across the world, even within the United States. And it happens so easily, even though there are laws and there are police and there's enforcement and there's nonprofits and all of that. So tell us why it's so easy. I mean, part of this is networking. People are trying to find jobs. It's poverty. It's an informal LinkedIn, right?
It is an informal LinkedIn. Like you heard in Mary's story, this is how people find jobs. A trusted person tells them about an opportunity. That's their LinkedIn. That's the connection to the job. And traffickers take advantage of that and exploit that all over the world. I'm here in Orange County, California. It happens right here. I actually identified a trafficking case a few weeks ago at my friend's house in her neighborhood. So I want to talk a little bit about the different forms of human trafficking and some of the misconceptions. So Vina, you shared that there are police working on this issue. People know about it, but did you know that you're actually less likely to be convicted for trafficking as a trafficker than you are to be struck by lightning? So traffickers are operating with impunity. They're not being held liable for the crimes. It's also an economically motivated crime. So one of the misconceptions is that these traffickers are these evil people who are after our children and going to kidnap them from Target. That's really not the majority of the cases that are happening. Traffickers want a victim who is easy to abuse and exploit, who's going to make them the most amount of money with the least amount of problems. And so does kidnapping and trafficking happen? Yes, it does. But traffickers are primarily preying on vulnerabilities, and they've almost always developed a relationship with the victim. They're trying to earn their trust. In the US, a lot of the times that's them acting like a boyfriend. It's called a Romeo trafficker. They tell them they love them. They're offering and meeting that need they have of love and belonging and connection. And they exploit that vulnerability.
Mhm.
In Mary's story, her need was economically motivated. And so she was told that there was a job that would help meet the needs of her family. So they find the vulnerabilities, they're great at doing that, and then they exploit them. So if you're watching this, you're wondering, how do I keep my grandchildren or my children safe? You have to find out how to reduce their vulnerabilities. Here in the US, a lot of the times that's that social connection, ensuring that they have love and belonging, and it's keeping them safe online, making sure that they know how to be safe on the internet. That's my soapbox for prevention here in the US. Keep those kids safe on the internet. Some of the forms that trafficking looks like, we have broadly labor trafficking.
Mhm.
This happens in the garment industries, it happens in the agriculture industries, it happens in technology. We know that in the Congo, they're actually mining things that are used in our cell phones, and that's produced through child labor, forced child labor. We have human trafficking in our chocolate. You'll see lots of fair trade chocolate. If you see it, buy it. That's a wonderful way that you can, in a small purchase, make an impact. It's in our supply chains, and through that, they're taking advantage of people, sometimes through bonded labor or sometimes through forced labor. Important to differentiate here. We often dichotomize labor trafficking and sex trafficking, but they often
Mhm.
converge, and there's often a lot of sexual exploitation used to keep people in situations of labor trafficking. So many women are sexually abused or molested at their workplace in order to keep them in those situations of labor trafficking. We also have a large percentage of trafficking victims being forced into marriages. I'm sure you saw this on the news when we were seeing everything happening in Afghanistan. I believe it's around 15 million people around the world are forced into marriages. And we see this through our work in Uganda as well. Um, We've seen young girls being trafficked from Congo and Rwanda who are forced into not one marriage, but multiple marriages. They're brought into this home and this home. So it's not clean. Trafficking is often messy. It looks like forced marriage, it looks like sex trafficking. So it's often hard to train law enforcement on what to look for because traffickers are adapting, they're changing. This case that I identified here in Orange County was a young girl going door to door selling magazines. And it didn't seem right to me. I saw her walk around the corner and get into a Rolls Royce SUV, and I said, "This is not normal." I called the police. They didn't believe me. I begged them. I said, "I've been doing this for over a decade. Please look into these red flags that I'm seeing." They called me 2 hours later and said, "Kelsey, yep, these girls were being forced into this. They were being kept in a garage in the Inland Empire." So it's complex. It's very complex. And we have to be, if we're training law enforcement, if we're training those frontline responders, continually training because traffickers are savvy. They're trying to make that money. And one last misconception is that usually in billboards, awareness material, you'll see a young girl being kept in chains. Sometimes, yes, chains are involved. It's not common though. And there are men and young boys who are victimized as well. Like you saw on the first slide, 71% are women and girls, but that still leaves 29% of victims who are men and boys.
Mhm. So thank you for all of that, and for bringing up that example of what you observed in Orange, California. So in the time we have left, you were talking to us about systems change, and I know EverFree is doing the work in Uganda and the Philippines. This is a complex problem, and like you said, the traffickers are extremely savvy. They are adapting to all of this. So tell us a little bit more about your systems change work, how to make this into a larger movement so that
Mhm.
all of us are more aware, and are kind of part of the solution in some ways.
Yeah, I would love to. I love systems change work. When I first got into this over a decade ago, I started out working for an organization that did aftercare for victims. And the thing that kept me up at night was that the systems that were bringing them into our program weren't changing. I felt like we were just this revolving door.
Mhm.
And so when I had the opportunity to start EverFree, I said, we can't just do the aftercare. It's important. We have to care for the victims, but we need to leverage the information we have and the influence that we have to actually change the systems and work ourselves out of a job doing aftercare. And so we approach system change on a couple different levels. Um, First is through, like you said, awareness. So we equip frontline responders with the information that they need to identify trafficking cases and to refer them to the appropriate entities. So you guys may have heard, you women may have heard about these rescue raid operations where people go in and they bust down doors and they get victims out of the situations. That's great. We want victims to get out of situations of trafficking. But if that's what we're doing, it's not actually tackling the systemic issue. If we want to change this issue systemically, we need to be equipping local law enforcement to identify cases. We need to be equipping them to provide trauma informed care and refer victims into an aftercare program. We then have to help the prosecutors know how to prosecute those cases and the judges understand the complexities of trafficking so that they can rule favorably and really understand how complex trafficking is. Often victims don't want to testify or their story may change because of the trauma that they've been through. We have to educate the people in the system on what this looks like so that we can get justice for victims. When we do that, it sends a message to the community that traffickers will be held liable for what they're doing, that it will no longer be that they're more likely to get struck by lightning than be convicted of trafficking. And this is something we've had great success with in Uganda. We've seen while globally prosecutions are going down in Uganda, where we've done this work, it's going up. More and more traffickers are being convicted and arrested for their crimes, and they're getting harsher sentences. And now, as you heard, they're having to pay restitution to the victims. And when you're trying to tackle something that's economically motivated, you have to get them where it hurts, which is the money. So that's one aspect of our systems change work. We also are using data and evidence to change the systems because we know that policymakers and funders, they make decisions based on data and evidence. And the trafficking sector has not been fueled by evidence since its inception. It's been fueled by a lot of passion and it's been behind in its collection of data and evidence. So that's actually why I've gone back to get my PhD and why it's so important to the work that we're doing at EverFree. We are using data and collecting data that's strength based. It's taken from survivors with survivors to inform policy and to inform funding decisions so that we're influencing the global landscape that trafficking operates in so that we can make this sector more effective and more efficient, that the resources are going towards things that are actively actually effective, and so that we can identify targeted prevention programs. So if we start to understand more what those underlying vulnerabilities are, then we can address proactively what those vulnerabilities are with prevention programming.
Absolutely. Kelsey, you are so right because RISE funds so many projects where we are dealing with the situation after it has happened. The gender-based violence, it's already happened. The human trafficking has already happened. And we are funding projects and aftercare and all of that. And more we are realizing that we could also invest in the systems change work, similar to what you're doing, try and prevent these things from happening. It's definitely very, very complex. You can see that working in one location, Uganda, you're getting so many more benefits and things are changing. This culture is changing and law enforcement is changing. Um, all wonderful ideas and wonderful ways of tackling this very, very complex problem. So, Kelsey, thank you so much for joining us. How soon can we call you Dr. Morgan?
Oh, well, my dad already started the second I joined the
Okay.
program. It's hilarious. But we have about 18 months to go. We're
Okay.
collecting data right now. We just finished our first round of data collection. It's been so fun. And the tool that I'm developing through the research is part of our strategy at EverFree. So we're very motivated for me to finish quickly.
Absolutely. And to put the tool into practice, the one that you're
Yes.
standardizing. So
Yes.
can we encourage our audience to go to the website of EverFree? There's so many questions, there's so many answers and solutions that people are seeking. So you want to quickly
Yes.
tell everybody your website, everfree.com, I guess?
Yes. So our website is everfree.org.
Sorry, or yeah.
And yeah, you can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We have some great social media that we're always updating with stats and signs, how you can spot trafficking. We have a place on our website where you can see the red flags. You may be able to identify it in your community, like I was able to identify it in mine. So, yes, please follow us on our social media channels. Check out our website. We have a big vision to replicate our model around the world because we're seeing it's working. And we're so grateful to all of you for helping and investing in that vision.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you for being here. And I'm sure our members are going to stay engaged and stay tuned to hear about EverFree's progress. Thank you so much.
Thank you.